Right, our next item is going to be a forensic audit update from Mr. John Sullivan from Sikitch. But before I bring him on, I have a statement I'd like to read to the board, and we'll go from there. I have a brief statement. I'm pleased to announce that the forensic audit ordered by the trustees in March of 2020 is complete. First, let me state, before we have Sikitch up here to discuss their findings, all allocations and misappropriation of funds, fraud, theft of money, malfeasance are baseless, political, and without any merit whatsoever. The findings you will hear allege no criminal wrongdoings and no missing money by anyone. I hope all of you heard that. The findings you will hear allege no criminal wrongdoings and no missing of money. As one of their starting points, Sikitch looked into the management letter from fiscal year 2017-2018, and many of their findings are based on the exact same material weaknesses from that period. Sikitch report was much more comprehensive than a regular and standard audit, but confirms the audit findings from Miller Cooper. Many of the repeat audit findings year over year were the result of village staff at that time not taking appropriate corrective actions. My administration made staffing changes in 2018, and new staff at the time were directed to take appropriate corrective actions to ensure that we reduce our material weaknesses. All transfers made by the village were legal and proper. However, due to the staff at the time, these required auditor adjustments were needed to close the loop due to the lack of accounting experience by that then staff. Once again, the infamous $250,000 loan transfer in 11/14/2017 from the village TIF account shows the money was paid back on 11/22/2017, as was reported by the then finance director to the village board. There was no money missing from anywhere, as the wild political drama played out on social media said by one of the trustees. Let me quote the forensic audit. Sikitch was unable to locate an alleged improper transfer in the amount of $250,000 from the water fund to the general fund on November 24, 2017, in either financial records or in bank accounts. A village trustee made a false allocation that this had taken place. This rumor had been dispelled. There was no fraud or improper fund transfer. I want to also point out something from the forensic audit, and I quote, there is also no support that transfers from the water fund or any other enterprise fund are improper. In fact, as stated, the village budgets for at least 10% of its general fund revenues from enterprise funds. Further, the village does not have any ordinance policy restricting enterprise funds. In 2018, our now former village treasurer attempted at great length to explain to two of the trustees on this board and to a few political vocal residents that operational transfers were. As you can see, operational transfers, as stated by the forensic audit, are legal, proper, and accounted for within the audits and the budget. Out of the 30 transactions selected for review by Sikitch, I want to point out that only our one vendor seemed to pop out. Five of the 30 transactions involved MOPheads, the village former cleaning service, where detailed invoices were not provided. When I first became into office as mayor, I knew some would be critical about the changes that we were going to make. I did not fire anyone. I did not cancel any service contracts. I wanted to be sure I fully understood exactly what was going on before we implemented any change, including staff. After a proper evaluation of the services provided by vendor at the time, we discovered that two former village employees were using village paid time to perform cleaning services. In fact, this was noted on many occasions by staff, but no pictures of this were posted on social media to embarrass them. No mention was made publicly until we see the forensic audit findings. I want to point out that our administration within the first 100 days put together a request for proposal for cleaning services, and we hired out a new service who does submit proper invoices. This contract will be relet for competitive bid this spring. My observation and my immediate recommendation to the village board from the forensic audit is as follows. Number one, Trustee RODRICK Grant submitted financial policy and procedures 2 years ago to be approved by the village board. To date, the village board has not taken action on these. It's time that the village board approve these policies and procedures immediately. We must continue working on correcting the material weaknesses and significant deficiencies as we begun in 2017 to 2019. Staffing changes were made in 2018 as a result of the lack of concern over correcting the material weaknesses. In order to better provide oversight and management of the village's finances, the village must begin utilizing purchase orders as soon as possible. Therefore, until the board approves a financial policy, we implement the following procedures effective February 2021. Number one, all non-reoccurring expenditures except those expended through petty cash or credit charges less than $600 are to have purchase orders. Number two,
less than or more than.
Purchase
orders. Said less than or more than.
Pardon me? Less than $600 are to have purchase orders. Purchase orders under $1,000 must receive approval from the department head. Purchase orders between $1,000 and $4,999.99 must receive approval from the department head and the village administrator and mayor. Purchase orders between $5,000 and $19,999 must receive approval from the department head, the village administrator, and the mayor. Purchase orders at or above $20,000 shall be subject to competitive bidding and or request for proposal, RFP. The finance department shall approve all purchases orders subject to budget approvals and cash flow and funding restrictions. I ask that the Village Board of Trustees amend the standing committees to include the Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee. This committee, among others things, this committee, among other things, it currently will review key transactions and other randomly selected transactions to review for compliance and with documented policies and procedures. All the reports from 2018 and 2019 and 2019 and 2020 have been held up due to the ongoing forensic audit that this board authorized. Now that it is possible completed, I will be asking that these be completed as soon as possible. Because of the forensic audit, and our auditors informed us they will not complete our regular audit until they review the findings of the forensic audit, which makes sense. Not having our audits completed on time impedes the village's ability to borrow money, finance purchases, and secure grant funding. I will be asking our finance team to move as quickly as possible in getting these completed. In summary, this forensic audit discovered no criminal activity, no fraud, no misappropriation of funds, and no other salacious or indictable offenses were uncovered. What this forensic audit did was point out once again the material weaknesses that one could discover while reading our regular audit report from 2017 to 2018 and delve into those a little deeper. I do not mean in any way to diminish the hard work that the staff from Sikitch did. They did the job that the trustees wanted them to do. but the political reality that is, it was a big waste of money. We could have spent this money on other projects, including fire hydrants, replacing water mains, cutting down dead trees, replacing sidewalks, hiring and training support staff. The only reason that a governmental entity would ever need to get a forensic audit if there was actual criminal activity discovered. Nowhere can any trustee or any political or any member of this public of the public point to the state that there was criminal offense. This was political, period. This was done in hopes of finding political dirt, and that is truly shameful. The purpose of a forensic audit would be to uncover the extent of that criminal activity. For instance, when the treasurer embezzles money from a police pension fund and former employees are overpaid in their retirements. As I stated, when I started the findings in our regular audit and in the forensic audit alleged no criminal wrongdoing and no missing of money. Sorry to disappoint all who were expecting this political bombshell, or otherwise, in the words of Hillary Clinton, this is a big nothing burger. Now I want to thank Sikitch for coming out tonight. Thank them for all the hard work that they have done on this audit, hearing all of the wild and baseless allocations made by some. And now I'd like to turn this over to Mrs. Sullivan for your presentation, sir. Mrs. Sullivan. Okay.
Okay, thank you for having us tonight. Just to correct the record, my name is Jim Sullivan, not John.
Sorry, Sam, that was
That's
me.
okay. That's okay. And I'm here today with Kate Burrian. She's a forensic auditor from our team at Sikitch as well. So do you want me, again, to present the report? The mayor went over many of our things we discussed in the report. Do you want me to represent that or just open the floor for questions? How would you like to proceed?
Can you please present your presentation?
Sure. Okay, so we were engaged to assess various financial processes, including accounts payable, purchasing, payroll, fund transfers. Our review was, for the most part, limited to 2017 and 2018. We received numerous documents that we reviewed, including the audited financial statements for 17 and 18 and the accompanying management letter. Some documented procedures the village has, a manual for best practices, job descriptions, and a bunch of financial records, treasury reports, chart of accounts, general ledger, trial balance, check register, accounts payable aging reports, and importantly, accounts payable board reports for 2017 and 2018, and any number of other financial reports we needed, we made requests for, and for the most part, I think we got everything. Along the way, we talked extensively with Anthony Finch. We also spoke with Shanice Nevels and Michelle Royster. So obviously, there's been a lot of turnover on the finance team in recent years, and that affects performance, and that affects consistency and how things are done and how things flow through the system. So as the mayor pointed out, your financial statement audit noted numerous recurring deficiencies in the village's internal controls that rise to the level of material weakness. Material weaknesses are a very significant finding in an audit report. And the auditors recommended a number of things to reduce these findings and to reduce the need for audit adjustments. There was numerous audit adjustments at the end of the year to correct things, including how fund transfers were recorded in your financial system in Civic. And they also noted that there were numerous inter-fund transfers that were not reported to the board. So what should have happened was a corrective action plan. I think the auditors recommended that. I know it was discussed extensively in our review of the 2017-18 board minutes. but a corrective action plan to remedy the deficiencies never came about. As far as we know, we have no indication that corrective action plan ever came about. We reviewed the village code. The village code does not have any provisions that cover purchasing, bidding, letting contracts, or describing or limiting the use of revenues received from the water and sewer fees, the motor fuel tax, or any other potentially proprietary and restricted funds. We reviewed, there's a couple policies and procedures that are documented, but they are very, very minimal. Throughout 2017-18, there is discussions at virtually every board meeting about preparing and approving a financial policies and procedures manual. And as discussed a minute ago, that has never come to fruition. So in essence, the village doesn't have the rules and regulations of how things flow through the system. And that's a key essential internal control. And it's essential that when people review transactions, they can test those against those policies and procedures to see if there's compliance with the policies and procedures. So that's a critical internal control document that is missing, at least to this point. The village does not utilize purchase orders. Purchase orders are also an essential budget control, also an essential internal control. And otherwise, department heads have the ability to engage vendors and incur significant liabilities without either finance department involvement or board approval. So as the mayor just said, we are told, and we were told before today, that the Sauk Village will move towards a more robust use of purchase orders. The village auditors identified numerous recurring material weaknesses. The village never adopted a corrective action plan to remedy those weaknesses, and the village does not have comprehensive policies, procedures detailing acceptable and agreed upon financial processes and establishing internal controls over those processes. So we did review transfer activity, inter-fund transfers from one fund to another. There was an issue with how these transfers were recorded, and that created issues that basically Kate, maybe you can explain this a little better than I can, but the transfers were not recorded on both sides of the ledger, if that's correct, Kate?
Right. They were incomplete, so
they were incomplete
issues.
They were incompletely recorded, and therefore that required the auditing adjustments at the end of the year. So there were transfers from the water fund. The water fund is an enterprise fund. Transfers from the water fund were transferred to the general fund to pay bills and to pay payroll, and even expenses not related to the water fund. Your records, your general ledger also reflects periodic payments back from the general fund to the water fund, but there's no supporting documentation or notes in your general ledger reflecting what payments were being repaid. We learned early in the process from Anthony Finch that water fund transfers are no longer used to pay bills that are more appropriately paid from other funds. Currently, bills are being paid from the general fund, we're told, after a transfer to cover the payment is made from the appropriate fund. There were a significant number of fund transfers that were reported to the board. Those are included in a table in our report. During 2017 and 18, again, it's difficult to say which or how much of those funds were repaid because of the way things are recorded in the system. There were other fund transfers that were not presented to the board. Fund transfers from the water department, from the water fund to the general fund. The village, like I said, does not have any documented policies or procedures or ordinances that require board approval for fund transfers, but it's a best practice, as pointed out by the auditors. It's a best practice that there should be board approval of all inter-fund transfers to reflect compliance with an approved budget, and if necessary, to approve budgetary changes. And your budget, the Sauk Village FY 17-18 budget, reflects the fire protection fund, the motor fuel tax fund, emergency telephone system, police seizure, working cash, and railroad noise mitigation funds are special revenue funds legally restricted to expenditures for specific purposes. The water fund is an enterprise fund, and the budget notes that there'll be customary transfers from the water fund to the general fund that cover the cost of general fund services as permitted. The approved budget document reflects general fund revenues include 10% of revenue from fund transfers. We were unable to find a $250,000 transfer alleged from the water fund to the general fund in November of 2017, either in financial records or in bank records. We just randomly selected 30 transactions to review. We were looking for supporting documentation that showed compliance with best practices. Ideally, the documentation should include a vendor invoice and a noted approval or sign-offs, in essence, okay to pay by village personnel who receipted the goods and accepted the services. 21 of the 30 transactions that we reviewed were properly receipted and approved. Originally, the village could not locate 9 of the transactions, which included mop heads, cleaning service. We subsequently got those reports, and they were deficient. We didn't get any detailed invoices from mop heads or evidence that a department head or other administrator approved the payments before processing. We selected 43 other transactions for review to see if those transactions were listed on the AP and payroll board reports that go before the board. And all the transactions that we randomly selected for review were listed on the AP board reports. We then tried to reconcile the AP and payroll board reports with the check register to ensure that everything presented to the board, or everything in the check register, had been presented to the board. And we came up with a difference of $122,000, but that could be a timing difference, meaning some checks could have been paid early in 2017 and 18 that had been approved the prior fiscal year. We, I think, may still be missing a board report for one of the meetings. Or perhaps they were payments that were not approved by the board, but that's relatively insignificant amount of money given the total payments. We looked at some CN Railroad Fund transactions. It's a fund utilized for railroad noise mitigation. The money is received from Canadian National Railroad. There were 5 vendors that were again, this is for 17-18, 5 vendors that were purportedly perform noise mitigation work. The invoices indicated the work included replacing or installing fencing, doors, and windows for residential properties located along the train tracks. We requested documentation to support the payments, including vendor invoices and purchase orders. We did not get support for $28,891 in payments from the fund, but these payments were listed and approved, were listed in the AP payroll board report and approved by the board. We then made our report includes a series of recommendations. Key and critical among these recommendations is The village worked to resolve its material weaknesses. You have outstanding audits for 1819, 1920 that need to be done. When material weaknesses keep recurring, your financial statement auditors are not going to be happy. And that could lead to some financing issues for the village. It could also lead to a qualified opinion from the auditor. So it's critical that those material weaknesses identified by the auditors be resolved and that your audits be completed in a timely manner. I know the audit was held up. Financial statement was held up because of this forensic audit, but those need to get done promptly. Those give the village an understanding, and to the extent that the financial statement audit gets into internal controls and some other issues, it helps the village remedy those in a more timely manner. The village must have financial policies and procedures documented, specifically identifying each person or each position's role in the financial processes, how things flow through the system, and who has responsibility for what. Otherwise, there's no agreed upon rules as to how payments flow through the system. There's no rules for transferring funds. There's nothing to test transactions against to see if they are in compliance, because there are no documented policies and procedures. It's also critical to start using purchase orders, and there are any number of organizations out there that deal with local government and local government finance staff, the Illinois City and County Managers Association, the Illinois Municipal League, the Illinois Government Finance Officers Association. So we made some recommendations in there about training staff. As I said earlier, you guys have had a lot of turnover in the finance department. And it might be best to train staff as they come on board and to use these resources offered by these organizations to train people in best practices. And also, if the village is short-staffed, there are any number of outside resources the village could use to keep its finance procedures up to speed. Things like bank reconciliations and other things. You could bring in outside resources to help Michelle and her staff keep things running. So that's it for our report. It is in draft form now. We did send that to the mayor. Open for questions if anybody has any questions.